The scorching desert sun hung high in the midday sky as Nora Fletcher's world crumbled before her eyes. The telegram trembled in her hand, the black ink blurring as tears welled in her eyes. Her father was dead, the family ranch seized by the bank, and her fiancé had abandoned her at the first sign of financial ruin. Arizona Territory, 1885, was no place for a woman alone, especially one who had just lost everything. Nora stumbled away from the telegraph office, barely noticing the curious glances from the townsfolk of Silverado. Her once pristine blue dress was now covered in a fine layer of dust as she walked aimlessly down the main street, her mind reeling with the impossible situation before her. 22 years old, alone, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She hadn't realized how far she'd wandered until the buildings of town thinned out and the vast, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona desert stretched before her. Overwhelmed by grief and despair, Nora's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the dusty ground. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs as tears streamed down her face, falling into the dust at her feet. "Miss, are you all right?" A deep voice cut through her misery. Nora looked up, squinting against the sun to see a tall figure on horseback. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his movements betraying years in the saddle. As he approached, she saw a face weathered by sun and wind, yet kind blue eyes filled with concern. He couldn't have been more than 25, with broad shoulders and a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from him. "I'm fine," Nora lied, hastily wiping away her tears with trembling hands. The cowboy crouched down to her level, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Pardon me for saying so, madam, but you don't look fine." His voice was gentle, like he was talking to a spooked horse. "Name's Yates Westfield. I work at the Broken Spur Ranch just outside of town." "Nora Fletcher," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Fletcher, it's high noon and hotter than Satan's kitchen out here. Whatever's troubling you, it's no good facing it sitting in the dust." He offered his hand. "Let me help you up, at least." Nora hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was surprisingly gentle as he helped her to her feet. The moment she stood, a wave of dizziness washed over her, and she swayed dangerously. Yates caught her before she could fall, his strong arms steadying her. "When's the last time you ate or drank anything, Miss Fletcher?" Nora tried to remember. Had she eaten breakfast? Yesterday's dinner? The days had blurred together since receiving word of her father's illness. "I thought so," Yates said, interpreting her silence. "Come on, my horse is just over there. I'll take you back to town, get you something to eat." "I have nowhere to go," Nora admitted, her voice breaking. "My father died yesterday. The bank has taken our ranch. I have nothing left." Yates's expression softened with understanding. "I'm mighty sorry to hear that." He paused, seemingly weighing a decision. "Look, my boss's wife is always complaining she needs help around the house. It ain't much, but it's honest work, a roof over your head and 3 square meals a day. What do you say?" Nora looked at this stranger, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere when she needed help the most. It wasn't proper to accept such an offer from a man she'd just met, but what choice did she have? "Thank you, Mr. Westfield. I accept your offer." Yates nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Good, and it's just Yates, madam." He led her to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood patiently waiting. After helping her gather what few belongings she had at the boarding house, they set off for the Broken Spur Ranch, Nora seated in front of Yates on his horse, acutely aware of his arms around her as he held the reins. The ranch was a sprawling property nestled in a valley, surrounded by mesas and the distant purple shadows of mountains. A large main house stood proudly at its center, with various outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse scattered around it. As they approached, Nora felt a mixture of trepidation and relief. Mrs. Harriet Cooper, the ranch owner's wife, was a formidable woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She looked Nora up and down critically when Yates explained the situation. "Well, you're a scrawny thing, but I suppose you'll do," Mrs. Cooper declared. "I need help with cooking, cleaning, and mending. Can you do those things, girl?" "Yes, madam," Nora replied, straightening her spine. Her mother had taught her well before consumption had taken her 5 years ago. Good, you'll sleep in the small room off the kitchen. Breakfast is at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 6. I don't tolerate laziness or complaining." Mrs. Cooper's severe expression softened slightly. "Yates says you've had a rough time. I'm sorry for your loss, child. But there's no better cure for sorrow than hard work." Nora nodded gratefully. "Thank you for giving me a chance, Mrs. Cooper." Yates tipped his hat to them both. "I best get back to the herd. Miss Fletcher, you're in good hands with Mrs. Cooper." As he turned to leave, Nora called out, "Thank you, Yates, for everything." He gave her a small smile that somehow reached his eyes, making them crinkle at the corners. "Just doing what anyone would do, Miss Fletcher." But they both knew that wasn't true. In a world where kindness was often in short supply, Yates Westfield had offered it freely when she needed it most. The days at Broken Spur fell into a rhythm. Nora rose before dawn to help Mrs. Cooper prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. She scrubbed floors, washed linens, churned butter, and mended clothes until her fingers were raw. The work was exhausting, but it kept her mind occupied, preventing her from dwelling on all she had lost. She saw Yates occasionally during meals when the cowboys would file in, ravenous from their work. He would always give her a polite nod and a quiet "Miss Fletcher," but rarely more than that. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking the way he treated his fellow ranch hands with respect, how he was always the first to volunteer for the hardest tasks, and the gentle way he handled the horses. A month into her stay at Broken Spur, disaster struck. A wildfire, sparked by lightning, threatened the eastern pastures where the cattle grazed. Every available hand was called to help move the herd to safety and fight the encroaching flames. Nora worked alongside Mrs. Cooper to prepare food and water for the men who returned to the ranch house in shifts, their faces blackened with soot, eyes red from smoke. Hour after hour they battled the blaze, digging fire breaks and beating back flames with wet blankets. When Yates hadn't returned by nightfall, worry gnawed at Nora's stomach. Mrs. Cooper noticed her anxious glances toward the door. "That boy knows these lands better than most," she said, her tone gentler than usual. "He'll be back." It was past midnight when the last group of cowboys returned. Yates was among them, supporting a younger ranch hand who had twisted his ankle. Nora rushed forward with water, her relief at seeing him alive overwhelming her usual reserve. "You're hurt," she gasped, noticing the angry red burn on his forearm. Yates shook his head dismissively. "It's nothing." "Others got worse." "Sit," Nora commanded, surprising herself with her boldness. "Let me tend to it at least." Too exhausted to argue, Yates sank into a chair while Nora gathered supplies to clean and dress his wound. Her touch was light as she applied a salve Mrs. Cooper had made from aloe and other herbs. "Thank you," Yates said quietly, watching her work. "You've been a blessing to this place, Miss Fletcher." Nora felt warmth spread across her cheeks that had nothing to do with the earlier heat of the fire. "I'm just grateful to have a place to be." "How are you settling in, really?" His blue eyes searched her face with genuine concern. "I keep busy," Nora answered carefully. "It helps not to think too much." Yates nodded in understanding. "Loss has a way of hollowing you out, takes time to fill up again." "You speak like someone who knows," Nora observed. A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my parents to cholera when I was 16, been on my own since then." Nora's hand stilled on his arm. "I'm sorry, it seems we have that in common now." "Seems we do." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. The moment was broken when Mr. Cooper, the ranch owner, entered the kitchen with orders for the next day. Yates thanked Nora again for her care and rejoined the other cowboys, but not before giving her a look that stayed with her long into the night. Summer gave way to fall, and as the land cooled, something warm began to grow between Nora and Yates. They never spoke of it directly, but it was there in the small moments, a lingering glance across the dining room, his offer to carry heavy water buckets for her, her saving the best pieces of pie for when he came in from a long day's work. One crisp October evening, Nora was hanging laundry when Yates approached, leading his horse. "Mrs. Cooper mentioned you haven't had a day off since you arrived," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other in an uncharacteristic display of nervousness. Thought you might like to see a bit more of the countryside than just the yard and the clothes line. Nora looked uncertainly toward the house. I don't know if I should, already cleared it with Mrs. Cooper, Yates assured her, said you deserve a few hours of fresh air. Before she could overthink it, Nora agreed. Yates helped her mount his horse before swinging up behind her. They rode through golden meadows and alongside a creek lined with cottonwoods turning yellow with the season. Finally, they stopped at a small plateau overlooking the valley, the broken spurs spread out below them like a painting. It's beautiful, Nora breathed, taking in the vista. Been wanting to show you this spot, Yates admitted. Found it my first week here, come up sometimes to think. They dismounted and Yates spread a blanket on the ground. From his saddlebag, he produced a simple picnic bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a jar of cider. This is wonderful, Nora said, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. As they ate, Yates asked about her life before her family, the ranch she'd grown up on, her dreams. Nora found herself opening up, sharing memories she'd kept locked away since her father's death. In turn, Yates told her about his own journey working ranches across 3 territories, saving every penny toward a place of his own someday. Never stayed anywhere as long as I have at Broken Spur, he confessed. Always felt the need to keep moving. And now? Nora asked, aware of a tension in the air between them. Yates looked at her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. Now I'm finding reasons to stay put. The implication hung in the air, neither quite brave enough to acknowledge it directly. Instead, they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. When Yates finally took her hand in his, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Their return to the ranch was quiet, both lost in thoughts of what had and hadn't been said. As Yates helped her down from his horse, he held her a moment longer than necessary, his hands at her waist, her hands on his shoulders. Thank you for today, Nora whispered. Yates began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. She waited, heart pounding, but whatever he'd been about to say remained unspoken as Mrs. Cooper called from the house, summoning Nora to help with supper preparations. The moment broken, they parted ways, but something had shifted between them, something neither could ignore. Winter came early that year, bringing bitter cold and heavy snowfall by November's end. The ranch hands worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had access to feed and water. Inside the main house, Nora and Mrs. Cooper kept the fires burning and the stew pots full, providing much-needed warmth and nourishment to men who came in with frost on their beards and exhaustion in their eyes. One evening, as a particularly fierce blizzard raged outside, Nora noticed Yates hadn't returned with the others. When she asked about him, the foreman explained that Yates had gone to check on some strays in the north pasture just before the storm worsened. He knows these storms, the foreman assured her, seeing her worried expression. Probably hold up in the line shack until it passes. But as hours passed and the storm showed no signs of abating, Nora's anxiety grew. She caught herself watching the windows, straining to see through the swirling white, starting at every sound that might herald Yates's return. Mrs. Cooper noticed, of course. The older woman had missed little of the growing attachment between Nora and the quiet cowboy. He's a good man, Yates Westfield, Mrs. Cooper said as they washed dishes together. Been watching him these past months. He's different when you're around, softer somehow, but stronger too. Nora's hands stilled in the dishwater. I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Cooper. The older woman gave a knowing smile. I think you do, child, and I think it frightens you as much as it frightens him. What does? Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Finding something worth risking your heart for when you've both lost so much already. Nora couldn't deny the truth in those words. Since her father's death and her fiancé's betrayal, she'd kept her heart carefully guarded. And Yates, with his history of never staying in one place too long, wasn't he just protecting himself from further loss as well? The storm continued through the night and into the next day. By afternoon, Nora was beside herself with worry when Mr. Cooper announced he and some men would go search for Yates once visibility improved. She insisted on helping prepare supplies for the search party. Just as they were readying to leave, a shout went up from one of the hands watching the road. Through the diminishing snowfall, a lone figure on horseback appeared, slumped in the saddle. Yates. Nora's heart leaped to her throat as the men rushed out to meet him. They helped him from his horse. He was half frozen, his lips blue, barely conscious. They carried him into the house where Mrs. Cooper directed them to lay him near the kitchen fireplace, the warmest spot in the house. "Get those wet clothes off him," Mrs. Cooper ordered, already gathering blankets. "Nora, fetch the whiskey from Mr. Cooper's study. We need to warm him from the inside out." Nora moved in a daze, following instructions mechanically while fear clawed at her chest. Yates's skin was frighteningly cold to the touch as she helped Mrs. Cooper remove his frozen layers and wrap him in warmed blankets. His eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on her face. "Nora," he murmured before slipping back into unconsciousness. "He'll be all right," Mrs. Cooper assured her, seeing Nora's terrified expression. "He's young and strong, but he needs warmth and rest." Throughout the night, Nora kept vigil by Yates's side, applying warm compresses, spooning broth between his lips when he was briefly conscious, monitoring his breathing and the slow return of color to his face. Mrs. Cooper tried to make her rest, but Nora refused to leave his side. By morning, Yates's fever had broken, and he woke fully, disoriented at first to find himself by the kitchen fire with Nora dozing in a chair beside him. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. Nora startled awake, relief flooding her features when she saw him alert. "Of course I stayed." "The cattle," he began, trying to sit up, "are fine," Nora interrupted, gently pushing him back down. "Mr. Cooper and the others took care of everything. Your job now is to rest and recover." Yates relaxed back into his makeshift bed, studying her face. "You look exhausted." "You look worse," she countered with a small smile. He chuckled, then winced at the pain it caused his raw throat. "Probably true." Nora helped him drink some water, her hand supporting the back of his head. When she tried to withdraw, he caught her wrist. "I thought I might die out there," he admitted quietly. "Got lost in the whiteout, couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Horse and I almost went over a ravine." His grip on her wrist tightened slightly. "All I could think about was that I never told you." "Told me what?" Nora asked, her heart hammering. Yates's blue eyes held her steadily. "That I love you, Nora Fletcher. Have almost since the day I found you crying in the dust." The words hung in the air between them, momentous and transformative. Nora felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were different from those she'd shed that day. These were tears of a joy so intense it was almost painful. "I love you too," she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. A smile spread across Yates's face, transforming it despite his exhaustion. He tugged gently on her wrist, pulling her closer until their foreheads touched. "Been wanting to hear that for a long while," he murmured. Their first kiss was gentle, mindful of Yates's weakened state, but filled with the promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Nora rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, marveling at how close she had come to losing him before they'd even begun. Yates recovered quickly under Nora's attentive care. Within a week, he was back on his feet, though Mrs. Cooper strictly limited his duties. The near-death experience had changed something in him. There was a new openness, a willingness to share his feelings that hadn't been there before. In the evenings, after chores were done, Yates and Nora would sit together on the porch or by the fire, talking about their pasts and daring for the first time to imagine a future. One night in early December, as they walked under a canopy of stars, Yates stopped and turned to face her. "Been thinking," he said, a nervous edge to his voice. "Mr. Cooper offered me a chance to buy a parcel of land at the western edge of Broken Spur, said I've earned it with my years of service." Nora's breath caught. "Your own ranch," Yates nodded. "It's small, just 100 acres to start. But the land is good, has a year-round spring. Could build a modest house, start with a small herd." He took her hands in his. "It would be a lot of work, a hard life at first. The best things usually require hard work," Nora said softly. "Thing is," Yates continued, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands, "I don't want to do it alone. Never saw much point in having a place of my own until I met you." Understanding dawned on Nora's face as Yates dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "Nora Fletcher, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Share this dream with me, build a life together. Joy bubbled up inside her, spilling over in a laugh that was half sob. Yes, yes, I will marry you, Yates Westfield. He rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion they'd been restraining in the presence of others. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Yates pressed his forehead to hers. Never thought I'd find home in a person, he whispered. But that's what you are to me, Nora. Home. With the Coopers' blessing, they planned a small wedding for Christmas Day. Mrs. Cooper helped Nora sew a simple white dress, while Mr. Cooper gave Yates time off to start building their cabin on his new land. The ranch hands pitched in, raising the walls in record time despite the winter weather. On their wedding day, the ranch house was decorated with pine boughs and red berries. A traveling preacher who stopped by for the holidays performed the ceremony. Nora wore her mother's cameo pinned to her dress, and Yates had polished his boots until they shone. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. Mrs. Cooper wept openly, while Mr. Cooper pretended something had gotten in his eye. The ranch hands cheered and fired their pistols into the air when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. The celebration continued well into the night, with fiddle music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army. As the festivities wound down, Yates led Nora to his horse, now their horse, which was hitched to a small wagon containing their few possessions. They would spend their wedding night in their new cabin, which was habitable if not fully finished. Ready, Mrs. Westfield? Yates asked, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. Ready, Mr. Westfield, Nora replied, her heart full to bursting with love and hope. They said their goodbyes amid well wishes and good-natured teasing. As they drove away under a star-filled sky, Nora leaned her head on Yates's shoulder, marveling at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. The cabin was small but solid, with a stone fireplace Yates had built himself. He had lit the fire earlier in the day, so the single room was warm and welcoming when they arrived. A bed with a new quilt from Mrs. Cooper stood in one corner, a table and 2 chairs in another. It was simple, but it was theirs. Yates lifted Nora across the threshold, setting her gently on her feet inside. "Welcome home," he said softly. That night, they loved each other fully for the first time, their bodies expressing what words could not, the depth of their connection. The joy of finding each other in this vast, often harsh world, the promise of a shared future. Spring came early the following year, bringing new growth to their land and new life to their herd. Yates had used his savings to purchase 20 head of cattle and 2 horses. It was a modest start, but with hard work and good fortune, they hoped to expand over time. Nora planted a garden beside the cabin, which had grown with the addition of a proper kitchen and a small porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. She had taken to ranch life with determination and grace, learning to ride and even help with the cattle when needed. One warm May afternoon, Nora was hanging laundry when she saw Yates riding in from checking the herd. There was something in the set of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse, that told her something was wrong. She set down her basket and went to meet him. "What is it?" she asked as he dismounted. "Rustlers," Yates said grimly. "They took 5 head from the north pasture. I followed their trail a ways, but there were at least 4 of them." Nora's hand flew to her mouth. 5 cattle was a significant loss for their small operation. "What will we do?" Yates ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'll ride to Broken Spur, let Mr. Cooper know. Rustlers hit one ranch, they'll likely hit others. We'll organize a party to track them down." "Be careful," Nora pleaded, knowing how dangerous such confrontations could be. Yates kissed her quickly. "Always am. Lock the doors tonight. I'll be back as soon as I can." That night was one of the longest of Nora's life. She paced the cabin, jumping at every sound, a loaded rifle close at hand. When dawn broke with no sign of Yates, her worry deepened. Mid-morning, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded her until she realized there were too many horses for it to be just Yates returning. She grabbed the rifle and moved to the window, her heart in her throat. To her immense relief, she saw Yates riding at the head of a group that included Mr. Cooper and several Broken Spur ranch hands. They looked tired but unharmed. As they dismounted in the yard, Nora rushed outside. "We got them," Yates announced, his face grim but satisfied. "Caught up to them near the territorial line. They put up a fight, but no one on our side was hurt bad." "And the cattle?" Nora asked. "Recovered most of them, including 3 of ours. The other 2 were already butchered." Yates embraced her tightly. "I'm sorry I worried you. You're safe." "That's what matters," Nora assured him. Though the loss of even 2 cattle was a blow to their fledgling ranch, Mr. Cooper approached them. "You two handled yourselves well for your first crisis," he said approvingly. "That's ranching for you, always something trying to take what you've worked for." "We'll manage," Yates said, his arm still around Nora's waist. "I've no doubt," Mr. Cooper nodded. "That's why I came along. Wanted to tell you in person, Mrs. Cooper and I have decided to expand our partnership with you. We'd like to invest in your operation, add another 50 head to your herd." Nora and Yates exchanged shocked glances. Such an investment would put their ranch on solid footing years ahead of schedule. "That's incredibly generous," Yates began, "but we can't accept. It's not charity," Mr. Cooper interrupted. "It's business. You've proven yourselves hardworking and honest. Good ranchers are worth investing in." He extended his hand. "What do you say, partner?" After a moment's hesitation, Yates shook the offered hand. "Thank you, sir. We won't let you down." The expansion of their herd brought new challenges and responsibilities, but Nora and Yates faced them together. By their first anniversary, their little ranch was beginning to prosper. They added a proper barn and expanded the cabin again, this time adding a small second bedroom. The new room remained empty until the following spring, when Nora discovered she was expecting their first child. When she shared the news with Yates, his joy was boundless. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, then set her down hastily, suddenly worried about being too rough. "Are you feeling all right? Do you need to rest? Should I ride for the doctor?" The questions tumbled out in a rush of concern. Nora laughed, placing her hands on his cheeks. "I'm perfectly fine, Yates. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and this one won't be joining us for months yet." Throughout her pregnancy, Yates was attentive to the point of hovering, much to Nora's amused exasperation. He insisted on hiring a young ranch hand to help with the cattle so he could spend more time close to home. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving delicate designs of stars and horses along its edges. The baby, a boy they named Samuel after Nora's father, arrived on a crisp autumn day with Mrs. Cooper serving as midwife. Yates paced outside until the infant's first cry split the air, then rushed in to find Nora exhausted but radiant, their son cradled in her arms. "He's perfect," Yates whispered, overwhelmed by the tiny being with his shock of dark hair and surprisingly strong grip when he wrapped his little hand around Yates's finger. "He looks like you," Nora said softly. "Same stubborn chin." As Samuel grew, so did their ranch. By his first birthday, they had expanded to 200 head of cattle and added several fine horses. Their cabin had evolved into a proper ranch house, with a spacious kitchen where Nora taught a young Mexican woman named Alina the finer points of American cooking in exchange for Spanish lessons. Life wasn't without its hardships: drought years when the grass grew thin, winters when blizzards threatened the herd, the occasional conflict with rustlers or displaced natives. But through it all, Nora and Yates faced each challenge as they had from the beginning together, drawing strength from their love for each other and their growing family. 5 years after that fateful day when Nora's tears had fallen into the dust at noon and Yates had gathered her close, they stood on the porch of their home, watching Samuel play with his 2-year-old sister Grace in the yard. Yates slipped his arm around Nora's waist, his hand resting on the slight swell of her belly where their third child grew. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked quietly. "That day when I found you crying on the outskirts of town." Nora leaned into his embrace, remembering the despair she'd felt then and marveling at the journey that had brought her here. "Never. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." Yates pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank God I decided to ride into town that day." "Thank God you stopped," Nora added, turning in his arms to face him. "Most men would have ridden right past a crying woman." "I'm not most men," Yates replied with a grin. "No," Nora agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. You're the man who held me until I slept, who gave me hope when I had none, who built this beautiful life with me. You're the love of my life, Yates Westfield. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Yates and Nora Westfield stood wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they had created together, a testament to the healing power of love and the strength found in sharing both joy and sorrow with someone who truly sees you. Their story, which began with tears falling into dust, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring, like the wildflowers that transform the desert after rain, proof that even in the harshest landscapes, love could take root and flourish.